Hey everyone, today I want to show you how to make a really quick image carousel that's on one slide. You won't need to do layers or anything, which makes it a little bit smoother looking when you're using the image carousel. So to get started, I'm going to add a image to my slide. Okay, now that I have my image in place, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this picture. I'm going to do 4 images for this carousel. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this picture 4 times, and then later on I can replace those images with the other images that I would want to use. Okay, so now the next thing we want to do is we want to group these images. So I'm going to group those images. And now what I need to do is I need to create the motion path. So with the group selected, you want to go to the animations tab, and then you're going to add a motion path line. But for this one, we're going to do a left and right. So we'll start with left, and then we also want this to be a relative start point. So what we want to do for this one is we want the second image to overlap the first image because we want this motion path to go to the left. So I'm just going to take my motion path and I'm going to just drag it over so that it overlaps the first image almost exactly. Now we need to add a second motion path to go to the right. So I'm going to add another line motion path, and I am going to make that go to the right, and I'm also going to make that a relative start point. So I'm going to grab my motion path and I'm going to make it so the first image overlaps the second image. So kind of the opposite of what we just did. Okay, now that we have our motion paths in place for our right and left motion, we want to change the trigger because the trigger is currently showing that our motion path is going to move when the timeline starts. But what we really want it to do is start when we click a button. So we're going to add some buttons to our carousel so that we can have the motion path triggered by the buttons. All right, so now that I have my arrows, I think what I want to do is add a little bit of shading to where image that isn't in the center of the carousel is sort of shaded out a little bit. Add some rectangles. So I'm going to add a rectangle here, and I will make that, I think I'm just going to make it white at about 12% transparency. I don't need an outline, so I'm just not going to have an outline. And then I'm going to copy this, and I will paste this one on the other side here. Okay, so now we have our arrow. So we want to change the triggers here so that the motion path starts when we click on the arrow. So for motion path 1, I am going to change this to when the user clicks on arrow 1. And then for the second one, I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to add arrow 2. Okay, so let's preview this, what we have so far. Okay, so we have our triggers working with our arrows. Let's say we're going that way, and then we can go this way. The only problem is when we get to the last image, we're going to be able to keep going and going and going forever. We don't want to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to create some additional triggers so that when the learner clicks on the arrow at the last picture, they can't go any further. So we're going to disable this arrow when they reach this picture, and then we're going to do the same thing for the first picture, because when the person is at the first image, we don't want them to be able to go further this way into blank nothingness. So we will make this arrow disabled when they're on this picture. First, I'm just going to adjust these rectangles a little bit. They're a little bit too big. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is add some states to our arrows. So we're going to click on arrows. We're going to go to our states, and we're going to add the state of disabled. And then for that state, I want to change the fill color so that it looks disabled. Maybe I'll go about 70% transparency here for that. And then I will do the same thing for the other arrow. We can add, what I like to do is just to add a small triangle on the top, like an indicator triangle. So I will add the triangle here. Okay, so one thing to remember with this is that because the trigger is going to be, it's going to know what to do because it's intersecting with the object. You have to make sure that the triangle is actually touching the objects, or else it's not intersecting and the trigger won't know what to do. So now that we have something that's interacting with the object, we can use triggers to do what we want it to do. So we're going to change the state of arrow 1. We're going to change the state to disabled when the object intersects with, when triangle 1 intersects with picture 4. Okay. And so, like we said before, we also want to make sure that it doesn't stay disabled. So we're going to add another trigger. So we're going to change the state of arrow 1. We're going to set it back to normal when the object stops interacting with, when triangle 1 stops interacting with picture 4. Okay, now we need to do the same thing for the other arrow. So let's preview what we have so far. So as you can see, this arrow is now disabled. We can't move this way at all. So as we move through our images, once we reach picture 4, this arrow should become disabled. Yep. So now we're disabled here. So now we can only view the photos or the images that are in our gallery, and we won't be clicking off into some white space that we can't get out of. So you can style this the way you want. You can, add different images. You should be able to go into each picture and you can replace the picture with the pictures that you would want to use. And that's pretty much it. Here's the same image carousel with a darker background, and as well as with a caption on each of the pictures. You can see it still works the same. I just added a few other details. So with this, you can add whatever details you want to make it look the way you want. There's endless possibilities of what you can style this to look like. But all in all, the basics are there to create a useful image carousel.